So at this time, I would like to call Reverend Karen up, and we are going to do our celebration of all faiths, and I will ask her to light the candle as I go forward. We perform this ceremony to promote the universal consciousness of life, which acknowledges that all people and all faiths, all sentient beings, come from the one great universal presence, which we call spirit. Fundamental to this truth is the unifying nature of all religious thought and experience, which we honor here today. We light a candle for the Tao, honoring the universal path of harmony and equilibrium, the natural way. We light the candle for shamanic traditions, honoring the beliefs and practices of all indigenous people, the way of primal spirituality. We light the candle for Hinduism, honoring the path of knowledge, action, and devotion. We light the candle for Judaism, honoring the ethical path of living by sacred law. We light the candle for all forms of Buddhism, honoring the Four Noble Truths and the path of compassion. We light the candle for all forms of Christianity, honoring the Christ consciousness as the path of love. We light the candle for all forms of Islam, honoring the path of submission to the will of God as the highest calling. We light the candle for the universalistic religion of Baha'i, honoring the path of unity and peace. We light the candle for all forms of New Thought, honoring the metaphysical path of mental healing through the practice of universal spiritual principles. And as Reverend Karen lights the healing candle, please put silently into the light the names of anyone you wish to experience the healing flame of God's eternal love. Thank you, Reverend Karen.
So welcome. Today our talk is Let There Be Light. And I thought I would take a moment and position us in our annual theme. As you know, we have an annual theme here at the New Vision Center. It is grounded in love, growing in grace. And I love that picture of the tree, because it reminds us that we do need to ground into that which is underneath us, which gives us this foundation of who we really are. And then from there, we can reach out into the world and share our light. And that is what today's talk is about. When we visioned for this season, which is about 8 months ago now, we were connecting with wanting to bring forth the light and not ignore darkness, stillness. That time of year, that time of life, that when we are called forward to deepen in. I like to think about the seed, right? The seed that is planted in the earth. I wonder if there's a moment where the seed yearns for the light and it's just not time yet. Reverend Leslie last week spoke so beautifully about that there's divine timing. When she shared with us the story of Easter that our Christian brothers and sisters are celebrating, and this idea that Jesus said, yes, and willingly went, even though he could not have known how long that darkness, that death would last. I have been thinking a lot about this week. During this time where we all experience a calling forth into stillness, slowing down, darkness, and we all experience it differently. I don't know about you, but for me, it's not just every day is different, how I relate to what is going on at this time in April of 2020, when we all had very different ideas of what we would be doing right at this moment. And yet here we find ourselves, asked to stay at home, to practice social distancing, to recognize that we, each one of us, can have an impact on how this whole story unfolds. For we don't know the answer of it yet. I brought for us a quote from Dr. Ernest Holmes that spoke to me. There's a light that permeates the world, but we have not sensed it. We need, in the silence of our own contemplation, to take time to feel that light and to see it. We have to hitch our earthly wagon to a spiritual star, because if we do not, we are going to hitch it to a make-believe life, something that has no light at all. The only light there is the light eternal. I love those words by Dr. Ernest Holmes. And I want to start off today by really asking each one of us, how are you doing it? How am I doing it? Recognizing the light and knowing that at the very center of my being there is this light, and yet experiencing our own individual forms of darkness, of stillness, of a pause. And how do we relate to it? It has a lot to do with our acceptance. I was reminded of this wonderful Zen story of a beautiful young girl in a village that found herself pregnant. Her angry parents demanded to know who the father was. At first resistant to confess, the anxious and embarrassed girl finally pointed to Hakuin, the Zen master whom everyone previously revered for living such a pure life. When the outraged parents confronted Hakuin with their daughter's accusation, he simply replied, "Is that so?" When the child was born, the parents brought it to Hakuin, who was now viewed as a pariah by the whole village. They demanded that he take care of the child since it was his responsibility. "Is that so?" Hakuin said calmly as he accepted the child. For many months, he took very good care of the child until the daughter could no longer withstand the lie she had told. She confessed that the real father was a young man in the village whom she had tried to protect. The parents immediately went to Hakuin to see if he would return the baby. With profuse apologies, they explained what had happened. "Is that so?" Hakuin said as he handed back the baby. I cannot tell you how much I yearn to just say, "Is that so? Is that so?" Those moments when things are being brought towards us, where we react with anger perhaps, not understanding, wanting to show my side of the story. And this Zen master did none of it. None of it. He was so anchored in the knowingness who he was that he could just respond to whatever came his way with, "Is that so? Is that so?" Let us all take a breath. Is that so? I think about this story often. In those moments when I am confronted with something that rattles me, and also in those moments when a light, an idea, a joy just bursts out from me. Because it's the same spectrum, it's just the other end, right? As we practice more and more in this spiritual path to be so clear of who I am, that I can be welcoming anything that comes my way. I create the space within me for the eternal light and allow it to burst forth however it may chooses. Is that so? That has become my mantra. And I invite all of us to take a moment, connect with something in your life that has you wanting to change it. Perhaps a plan could not take place. Many of us had to cancel trips, change ideas of senior services. A lot of things went online. What does it take to relate to it by feeling, by saying, by living? Is that so? Do you hear the curiosity in there? The willingness to accept what is. I love that came up in the reading, it came up in Jolene's prayer. I see it everywhere, everywhere. Is that so? You will hear me say this a lot in the coming days and weeks. I had a glimpse of it. I think it's about a week and a half ago. I woke up in the morning and I had a desire to go out into the world. I called it taking this ministry on the road. And I just drove by different congregants that I knew where they were living, and for a drive-by, just a waving, just a, I'm here, you're here. It was delightful. And on one of those stops, I was up in Cave Creek and called one of our congregants who lives there. And she said, well, would you please come over? We have this big space outside. We will observe social distancing. We will all be safe. And please stop by. And so I did. And that day is a reminder for me to what can happen when I say yes. When I say yes to whatever idea rises up as an inspired divine idea, because they do feel different, don't they? That voice that says, oh, how about this? Is a very different voice that says, you have to do this. I hope this is the same for everyone. And as we are practicing to listen more and more, and we hear that inspired voice, that is the one we want to say yes to. So I find myself sitting across this beloved congregant, and she said, oh, the horses need to be walked. Would you like to go? I have never in my life walked a horse, but I said, yes, I would like to. And so this picture was taken that day. And every time when I look at that picture, it reminds me what is possible. What is possible? That God, that the divine, that life, that light is not only in what we have planned, but it often shows up when we say yes, when we are willing to open our heart and to accept what is. So this beautiful horse, her name is Grace, and she was very, very pregnant. And so much so that just a couple days later, she gave birth to a beautiful foal. There. And so, perspective, the willingness for us to look at what is from a different place changes everything. It changes everything. Where in your life could you change your perspective, the way you relate to what is, to witness the goodness that comes from it? The author, Margaret Atwood, says this: when you are in the middle of a story, it isn't a story at all, but only a confusion, a dark roaring, a blindness, a wreckage of shattered glass and splintered wood. Let's breathe into that. Have you had an experience of having something crush around you? Yeah. She goes on saying, like a house in a whirlwind, or else a boat crushed by the icebergs or swept over the rapids, and all aboard are powerless to stop it. It's only afterward that it becomes anything like a story at all, when you are telling it to yourself or to someone else. That, my beloveds, is where I feel we find ourselves in the midst of an upside-down world. And we don't know yet what the end of the story is, what the story is going to be. We don't quite know yet, who am I going to be when I look back to this time? Did I show up the way I wanted to? Did I learn something? Did I become a better person because of this? Or was this a time where I was really called forth to look at the things in my life that I want to have a different experience about? We don't know yet. I do feel that the more we can practice the "is this so?", the better we're going to be for it. For as we open ourselves to allow the light of the divine that is always there, it will direct us to the next step. It will inspire us with ideas. I have been inspired this week by this community. It is amazing the outpouring of love, of gifts that have been sent our way. Last week we had a request for those of you who felt inspired to send in your alpha poem. Remember, we connected with a quality that would support us, and then we were asked to write a poem. And I want to share one of them that was sent forth, and it is on light. Light illuminates the gift of health received with thankfulness. It was submitted by Sue Miller. I think about 25 poems were sent in so beautifully. So thank you. And please continue to send them in. We are going to put them into that wonderful blog that Jeff put together. And I want to draw your attention to this image. This is an image that was sent in by another congregant. And she shared that she woke up in the morning to seeing these lights in her bedroom. And she shared the awe that she felt because she had no idea where they were coming from. And it felt like a gift, just like a gift. And because we're talking about light, she sent it in to share it with us. And here's what's really interesting. The very next day, when she woke up about the same time, the lights were there. But she didn't quite have the same sense of awe because she had discovered how these lights came about. So where can we allow ourselves to be in awe? It's easy for me being here, seeing these beloveds, the ones that are in the sanctuary, knowing those who are right there on the other side of the camera, feeling the love that is being sent forth to build this container to continue to care for this beloved community. And I leave you with this invitation. I think it's coming from Brené Brown, and I think it was in the book, The Gift of Imperfection, where she invited us to make a joy and meaning list. So this afternoon, if you have a little bit of time, I invite you to sit down and make a joy and meaning list for yourself. What brings me joy? When I have this sense of joy, what is present? And you can do it for yourself, in your family, and I want to do it as a community. When we have this feeling of joy of being in spiritual community, what is present? And what is the meaning for us? For I believe it takes all of us to build this experience. And I thank you for your part in it, for sharing your light, for giving your gifts. And so it is. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And so I invite all of the practitioners and ministers of this teaching here in the sanctuary, at home, wherever you hear this prayer, please rise, stand with me as we hold the consciousness, as we take a moment to recognize that the divine has always been and will always be. That which is greater than I am, as we recognize it as love, as light, as peace, as harmony, as abundance, as joy. As we're breathing into this space, we're noticing how easy it is to open up, for we have been practicing for this moment. All of that spiritual practice, every prayer we have ever uttered, every meditation we have ever been involved in, has prepared us for this now moment to allow anything that is unlike love and light and peace and harmony to just simply fall away into the nothingness from which it came, and to breathe into the spaciousness that is being created. It is here that we are aware of our connection. It is here that we are aware of that we are of the divine, that we have our being in it and it has its being in us. And so we breathe it in, grateful for this now moment. And it is from this place that I speak a word for all the beloveds who are joining us, all the beloveds who have placed their prayer requests into this virtual prayer chest. And as I read those names into this service, we are so aware that we are one. We are truly one. And so I know this as a truth of Mark and Frank, of Rhonda, Diane, Mr., of Craig, Jeff, Jolene, Mary Lou, Elaine, Victor, and Molly, Henry, Leslie, Bill, Angelica, of Zulma and Buzz, of Virginia and Maureen, of Russ and Susan, of Linda and Ginny and Sandra, of Peter and Ron. I know this is the truth of Bonnie and Jack, of Beth and Steve, of Robert, Heather, Megan, Catherine, Rick, Shay, Gina, Karen, Joan, Katrina, Marianne. It is the truth of Joanne and Janet, of Ellen and Jen, of Pam, of Judy, of Andy. It is simply the truth of each and every one of us. And so we stand in the truth believing. We stand in the truth recognizing the light at the very center of who we are. And we stand in the truth knowing that as we share our light with the world is better of it. How grateful I am. How very grateful. To know this truth, to live this truth, to share this truth. I simply let it be. And together we anchor this truth as we say, and so it is.